Woodworking is full of rules, but a lot of them total and complete nonsense. If you want to build better projects and stop wasting your time, it's time to rethink what you've been told. You've heard the advice. Make sure to clamp your parts firmly, and for a smoother finish, stand to a higher grit. But what if none of that is actually helping you? The truth is, these myths are everywhere. And today, we're busting 10 woodworking myths that just won't die and showing you what actually works, because your time, tools, and wood deserve better. Have you fallen for these woodworking myths? Let's see. You've heard the old adage about how woodworkers can never have enough clamps. Clamps are unbelievably helpful, and I would consider them a necessity to have. And when you're gluing up large panels, you need to clamp things as tight as possible, because tight clamps equals strong glue-ups, right? Wrong. Now, I totally understand where this thought comes from, and I was guilty of it in the past. The idea is that you want to make sure that there are no gaps between boards when you glue them up. So if I squeeze them together as tight as I possibly can, I'll be all good. Here's the problem that you don't see at first. When you apply more and more and more clamping pressure, you will actually make your panel bow, and once the glue dries, your panel will stay that shape. Look online at clamp sales pages, and they all tout how much clamping force their clamps can exert. Like these ones, 1,500 pounds of force. You see me glue up large panels with clamps like these all the time. But what you can't see through the video is how little clamping force I'm actually using. I am not turning these handles as hard as I possibly can. No, I bring the boards together with as little pressure as possible to get an even line of glue squeeze out. So how do you do this properly? It starts with proper edge joining. If your edges of your boards aren't straight, you will never get the boards together. Run it through the jointer, use a track saw, use a table saw sled. The list goes on and on, but make sure those edges are as straight as possible. After that, apply glue and clamp the boards. But here, use a straight edge to see if you're applying too much force. See daylight, back off, or increase the clamping pressure. If you have an even bead of squeeze out along your glue seams and the straight edge has no daylight whatsoever, then you know that you have plenty of clamping pressure. You're all good. All right, so then what's the point of having parallel clamps like this? I like how they stand straight up on the work surface, have nice large handles that are easy to turn, and have large clamping faces. Sure, they allegedly have 1,500 pounds of clamping pressure, but that really doesn't matter. More isn't always better, and that's true for the next myth too. What's the first thing anyone does when they see a piece of furniture? Anyone? The answer, they feel it with their hand. As a woodworker, you want your projects to impress everyone who sees them. So if the first thing people are going to do is touch the furniture, that means I should sand it to 320 grit, 420 grit, or maybe even higher. It will give me a smoother finish and thus make my projects better. Right? Wrong. While yes, it is true that a board sanded with 120 grit looks and feels so much better than a board sanded with 60 grit, but there is a point of diminishing returns. Sanding takes an absolute eternity, so you want to spend as little time as possible doing what I consider to be the worst task in woodworking. When it comes to finishing your project, you will be using one of two basic types of finish: a penetrating finish or a top coat finish. A penetrating finish is typically like some sort of oil. Think tung oil, Danish oil, or the ever popular Rubio Monocoat. These finishes penetrate into the wood and you end up feeling the wood itself, not the finish. A top coat, on the other hand, like shellac, varnish, or polyurethane, which we will talk more about later in the video, sits on top of the wood. So what you are feeling is the finish, not the wood. So if you're using a top coat finish, you are wasting your time sanding above 150 or 180 grit. In fact, standing up to something like 320 grit or higher can actually close the wood pores and make it more difficult for the top coat to stick, making your finish less durable and more likely to fail over time. Instead, stop around 150 or 180 grit. Apply your top coat and then use higher grits between coats of finish to really flatten out small imperfections and get a nice, smooth finish. Now, if you're using a penetrating finish, since you will be feeling the wood, you do want to sand the wood to a higher grit, right? Wrong. Again, sanding higher closes the pores of the wood, which inhibits the finish from penetrating into the wood and getting a good bond. Look at a product like Rubio Monocoat, and they specifically tell you not to sand higher than 120 grit because it will affect the protection and bonding of the product. When you apply penetrating finishes like Rubio, you use an abrasive Scotch-Brite pad, and I found that that not only helps drive the oil into the wood, but also leaves the surface finish really smooth. In summary, pay attention to these specific sanding recommendations for the finish you are using and save yourself precious time and precious money from buying sandpaper you don't really need. Which reminds me of the next myth. You've probably realized by now that woodworking can be an expensive hobby to get into. Table saws, dust collectors, drills, routers, the list goes on and on. The price of each individual tool really adds up. And if you really want something that's going to be more than just a paperweight, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money to get good tools, right? Wrong. I have tools from just about every brand out there, from Ryobi to Festool to Milwaukee to DeWalt, and let me tell you firsthand, they all get the job done. Well, yes, it is true that there are some pricey tools out there that blow cheaper versions out of the water. That isn't always the case. Take these red measuring and marking tools that I'm sure you're familiar with. This one here, $130, and I totally fell for it. And fell for it again, spending another $130 on these rulers. You need to really pay attention to the materials that your tools are made out of. These premium tools are made out of aluminum, which means they are incredibly easy to manufacture and also incredibly soft. Drop them and you get a huge chip or dent, which means that they are no longer straight or square. More expensive does not always mean better. I can do the exact same thing I do with these as I can with a significantly cheaper version. You are woodworking, not machining metal and needing tolerances down to 3 or 4 decimal places. You don't need this stuff. Now, what's one tool out there that's incredibly cheap and incredibly valuable? This concealed hinge jig. Now sure, you could go out and spend several $100s on a drill press or several $1,000s on a specialty hinge boring jig. Or you could just spend like 40 bucks on this and accomplish the exact same thing. Just clamp it onto your door, attach the drill to the bit, drill out the cup, vacuum up the chips, and you've got a perfect spot for your hinges to knock out high quality doors. The only issue with this jig is all the dust, but I've solved that with my custom designed replacement cup. It's a direct replacement for the stock drill guide with the added ability to attach a shop vac hose, and you can drill out cups for hinges all day without any dust. They are in stock and shipping now, and still fractions of the price of buying a drill press. See, you don't need expensive tools for them to be highly effective. While buying new tools is fun, the reality is it's not always the best advice, which leads me to my next myth. For most people, the table saw and the miter saw are at the heart of the wood shop and get used significantly more often than any other tool. Both of these saws are designed to make repeated cuts efficiently, and it's easy to lose track of how long it's been since doing maintenance. What's truly the last time you waxed your table saw or lubricated the gears? You've heard everyone say it, and you've been guilty of it. If you're having a hard time making a cut, just go a little slower and push a little harder, right? No. If you can't easily push your piece of wood through the blade, you're doing something wrong. The most common is using the wrong blade, like using a plywood blade when trying to rip thick hardwood instead of a dedicated ripping blade. When you have to force a cut, you are much more likely to slip and injure yourself. Think about a dull knife in the kitchen. You try to force it to cut through something and you end up slipping and hurting yourself. Whereas a sharp knife cuts through food effortlessly and is actually safer for you to be using. But the more sneaky reason for why you are struggling to make a cut is a dull blade. The most common reason for a dull blade is simply because it's dirty. When blades cut through wood, they naturally heat up from friction, and this friction causes the sap or pitch in the wood to melt onto the blade. This is most commonly seen when using pine, but can happen with all types of wood. So whenever you see this, that means that you need to buy a brand new blade, right? Again, no, you are wasting your money doing that. The blade that you have is just fine. What you need to do is periodically clean all of the buildup off of your blades. I like this tub with an abrasive pad soaked in cleaning solution to easily clean up my blades, and something that I do about once a month since it really honestly only takes about 1 to 2 minutes per blade. I just attach the magnetic handle to the blade, give it a little spin, brush the edges, and then I'm good to go. This brings the blade back to life and makes cuts effortless again. Now, if you clean the blade and it still struggles to make the cut, that means that the buildup isn't your problem, but rather the carbide is actually dull. This means you need to send your blades out to get sharpened. I drop off my blades at my local woodworking store to get sharpened, and the whole process takes about 10 days. There are also services where you can mail in your blades too. So what I like to do is have multiple blades in my shop and wait till I have about 3 or 4 blades that need sharpened and do it all at one time. And since I have extras on hand, I can constantly have fresh blades ready to go, and I'm not waiting on the sharpeners. If you buy bottom of the barrel blades, you have next to no carbide on the tips, so you can't really sharpen them maybe more than once if you're lucky. So spend just a few bucks more on quality blades that have much more carbide on them and will actually save you money in the long run. Getting good cuts is one of the most critical aspects of woodworking. Use the right blade, clean your blades when they need it, and sharpen them when cleaning doesn't do it for you. You don't need to go buy a brand new blade when cut quality starts to diminish. Speaking of good cuts, I'm working on editing my next project video right now, and I want to see if you can guess what I'm building without me telling you. Here are a few clips. And while we're busy busting woodworking myths, there's another myth we should clear up real quick. That your online activity is private.
But I got a news flash for you, Walter Cronkite. You aren't.
That's where today's sponsor, Surfshark VPN, comes in. Think of it like a good dust collection system for your internet life, keeping the mess out and your data clean and private. Surfshark encrypts your connection, hides your location, and blocks those annoying trackers, ads, and malware, whether you're at home or hopping on sketchy coffee shop Wi-Fi. And just like how I don't limit myself to one tool for every job, Surfshark doesn't limit your devices either. One account covers unlimited devices, so your whole household can stay protected. With over 3,200 servers in 100+ countries, you can browse from virtually anywhere, and maybe even score better deals on tools while you're at it. So protect your digital shop space. Head to surfshark.com and use the code Spencley when you sign up for 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Trust me, This is one quality tool you'll want in your online arsenal. Did you figure out what I was building in my next video? Let me know down in the comments below. Speaking of quality, the whole reason we all got into woodworking is to make high quality things for our homes. Naturally, when you build something, you want to use the best materials for the job. So when starting out, you ask others what the best material is for a specific project. Making an outdoor project, try something that's naturally rot resistant like cedar, sapele, or teak. Making a dining table, try something like walnut, oak, or cherry. Without a doubt, the one material that gets absolutely raked over the coals is MDF or medium density fiberboard. Everyone talks about how any project built with MDF is bottom of the barrel junk and will fall apart like IKEA furniture. Everyone also bashes how poor it is at holding fasteners and how at any sign of moisture, it swells up and gets ruined. Would I use MDF for building a dining table? Definitely not. Would I use MDF for an outdoor chair? Again, no. So MDF should be avoided at all costs, right? No. MDF is an incredibly important and useful material. Making templates to then flush trim parts to make repeatable copies is the perfect situation to use MDF because it's dead flat, cheap, and super easy to shape and smooth out. MDF is also the perfect material if you're working on a paint grade project. Because of its incredibly smooth surface, you don't have to worry about wood grain popping through the finish. You can get a perfect, smooth, painted finish with minimal effort. This allows you to achieve factory paint results in your home garage. MDF is also the perfect material to use in shaker-style doors and drawer fronts. Whenever I make paint grade doors, I like to use hard maple for the outer frame for durability, but the center panel always gets made out of MDF because it will stay dead flat, paints like a dream, and the added weight and density really gives the door a nice hefty, solid feel. If building high quality shaker doors and drawer fronts is something you want to learn, I just launched my online course with more than 2.5 hours of detailed video guiding you through every single step, and it includes an automated calculator which gives you every single dimension of every single piece. No guesswork, just instant results you can count on every time. Check out the link in the description or scan the QR code to get perfect doors and perfect joints. Speaking of perfect joints, joinery is an incredibly important part of woodworking. Bad joints lead to projects that fail over time and also unsightly gaps. So when putting pieces together, you want your joints to be really, really tight so that they last for generations to come, right? No. If you cut joinery where it's so snug that it requires a hammer to get the pieces together, that's great if you never intend on putting glue in the joint. But once you apply glue, you are in for a rude awakening. Normal woodworking glue is a PVA formula, or polyvinyl acetate, which is water-based. The issues with that is that the water will soak into the fibers of the wood and cause the wood to swell up. Then when you go to put the joint together, it's going to be even more difficult than it was before. Even if you do manage to get the pieces together, you have a high risk of cracking the wood, or it may require you to clamp the daylights out of a project and pull the whole thing out of square. Neither of which you want in your project. Remember how earlier we talked about the issues with over-clamping your projects? One way to avoid this is to make the joints just barely looser. I am not advocating for sloppy joints, but give yourself just a little more room where you can easily slide the pieces together, but they're still snug. You should not need a hammer to put your things together. Then apply normal wood glue and you will be all set. I should mention that there is an alternative solution that does not require altering your joints. Instead of using regular PVA glue, try something like hide glue or epoxy. Neither of these are water-based, which means they won't swell up the joint. You also get the added benefit of increased open time, which makes difficult glue-ups less stressful since you're not fighting against the glue setting up on you. Not to mention, adhesives like these actually act as a lubricant, making your joints go together a little easier. The downside with using hide glue is that it can be difficult to work with, doesn't have a long shelf life, and can fail during humid or hot environments. The downside with using epoxy is that it is pretty expensive, creates a sticky mess that is hard to clean up, and takes forever to cure. That's why, in general, most woodworkers tend to stick with normal PVA woodworking glues. You are not a metal machinist looking for incredibly tight tolerances. Woodworking doesn't require that same level of precision. Leave a little room for your glue and don't chase absolute perfection. Which leads me to the next myth. Do you know who is the most brutal, most difficult, and most annoying customer a woodworker has to deal with on every single project? Themselves. Woodworkers tend to hold themselves to ridiculous standards and demand absolute perfection. So if you're spending 20, 40, 60 plus hours on a project, it needs to be absolutely flawless. If not, you need to start over, right? No. Woodworking is all about learning skills. Skills to glue together boards to make larger panels. Skills to cut gapless miters. Skills to get a beautiful finish, and so on. But by far the most important skill that most people don't practice is the skill to fix inevitable mistakes. Building a bookcase and cut a shelf too short? No problem. Just cut all of the other shelves to that shorter size, and no one will ever know the whole thing was supposed to be a 1/16 of an inch wider. Building a chessboard and the squares are supposed to be exactly 2 inches, but you cut them to 1.9 inches instead? No problem. Your chessboard is just a fraction smaller. Building an expensive dining table out of solid walnut and drop the panel on the ground and dent the corner? No problem. Just use a large router bit to give the table a new edge profile. In any of those examples, you didn't fail to create a great project. You had to learn to adapt to what is in front of you and exercise the skill of fixing mistakes. The other skill you need to learn is to stop pointing out your mistakes to other people. Woodworkers are notorious for showing their friends, family, and clients a beautiful new table and then immediately following up with, yeah, but under here you can see a small scratch. Or maybe something like, yeah, this was supposed to be a 45-degree angle, but it's actually like 44 degrees. Stop doing this. No one is ever going to notice these tiny things. And yeah, I messed this one up, but not a big deal. And as long as it doesn't ruin the integrity of your project or is incredibly visible to the average person, it doesn't really matter. Now, if your dining table is 2 feet shorter than it's supposed to be, that's obviously an issue, but don't sweat the small stuff. Just like me, you will make mistakes with the tools you buy. You will also make mistakes with the projects that you make. But being creative and figuring out how to fix those mistakes is truly what separates a good woodworker from being a great woodworker. You know what else separates a good woodworker from a great woodworker? This next myth. Woodworkers are always after detailed PDF plans like the ones I have on my website for every project I build on this channel. While those plans do include detailed diagrams and everything you need to be successful at creating the project, there's a big myth that goes around with plans. Logically, most would think that you should cut all of your parts and pieces to exactly what those plans say, then assemble it all together. Kind of like following a cookbook recipe, right? No. Woodworking plans are meant to serve as a baseline reference for projects. The reality is that you will cut a piece too short or too long. Then when you go to assemble everything together, there will be something that is way out of whack. Instead of blindly following those plans, you need to use them as a reference and make adjustments where necessary. Here's an example of what I mean. So I have not added any glue to these joints, I just put everything together with a dry fit, and that's because I want to now focus on putting some interior stretchers in. Now yes, the exact measurements for these pieces are listed in the plans, but chances are when you have these tapers and miters and everything like that, these pieces are not going to fit perfectly. So what you need to do is something called referential measuring. And that's where you first cut your pieces oversized and then set them down exactly where they're going to go and mark where they need to get cut. I don't care what that measurement is, just as long as it fits perfectly in between these two pieces.
Whenever possible, try to set up something like a stop block on your miter gauge to ensure that all of your pieces are cut to the exact same length. Like I said earlier, at this point in the project, it doesn't really matter too much what the length of these pieces is supposed to be in the plans. I've cut so many angles that I truly didn't even bother to look at the dimensions in the plans now. Instead, I used referential measurements to mark where the pieces needed to be cut. The first cut was slightly too big, so back at the table saw, I nibbled off just a hair until I got a perfect fit in between those outside stretchers.
Making referential measurement is one of the most important skills for woodworkers to learn if they want to take their projects to the next level. It's simply just another form of learning how to adapt to changes on the fly and not blindly following something, which leads me to the next myth. Watch just about any YouTube video out there where someone glues up a large panel of wood, and you will almost always see them use biscuits, dowels, or dominoes between the boards. If you're a beginner without these tools, you can't successfully glue up large panels. The reason is that this makes a table significantly stronger and that any large glue up without them will fall apart over time, right? No. Boards that are glued up long grain to long grain like this are incredibly strong along the glue seam. You don't need reinforcement whatsoever here. So why do people, including myself, often put biscuits, dowels, or dominoes between the boards? It is 100% for alignment. But what does that mean? Take several boards, apply glue, and then squeeze them together. The boards will naturally shift and slide around a bit. In order to get the flattest panel possible, you want to get all of those boards aligned so they sit coplanar with one another. If you're fast and do it before the glue tacks up, you can adjust them by hand, but it is often tough to get things perfect, which will require you to spend a lot of extra time later flattening out the glue seams. And if you're working on longer boards like a 9-foot long panel glue up, this whole process gets exponentially more difficult. This is where an alignment aid comes in. Before adding glue, you can cut in spots for your alignment aids. Then, once you add glue, you just push the boards together and they are perfectly coplanar with one another. No matter how often people reiterate the fact that this is not done for strength, this myth perpetuates itself. Now, let's be honest. Does it make the glue up stronger? Yeah, probably, but that is not the sole intention of doing this. If you don't own a biscuit joiner or a domino, no worries. You could use a cheap doweling jig to achieve the same result, which is what I did when I got started. It's just a little bit slower, but still works great. If you don't believe me how well alignment aids work and don't want to spend the money on a new tool, try this out. Take the two boards that you want to glue together. On the table saw, cut a groove down the center of both boards. Widen the groove until a thin 1/4 inch piece of plywood fits nicely in the groove. Now, cut the plywood into a thin strip. Now insert the strip into the groove on both boards and push them together. See how they are exactly in line with one another? That's exactly what it's like using a biscuit joiner or a domino. Alignment aids make your life so much easier. And you want to know what else is supposed to make your life easier? This next myth. So you picked up project plans on my website, maybe even took the shaker style cabinet door and drawer course, and you created an awesome project. Well, it's not done quite yet. You still have to protect and finish everything. There are so many finish choices out there, from paint to hand rub oils to lacquer. The list goes on and on. It's truly hard to pick. But there is one finish out there that most people claim to be the best choice: polyurethane. It's relatively cheap, fairly easy to apply. The water-based version doesn't yellow wood or give off nasty fumes. It's readily available pretty much anywhere, and it gives a very durable, solid surface. A lot of people refer to polyurethane as a bulletproof finish. So you should apply polyurethane on every project, right? No. Polyurethane is great at protecting furniture that will receive a lot of use, like this end table or my computer desk I built several years back, both of which get used every single day. It's easy to clean, water resistant, and hasn't yellowed over time. It was a great finish choice, right? Well, polyurethane does have its pros, but it also has its cons. First, it looks and feels plasticky. For something that I touch every single day, I just feel like I'm working on a big sheet of plastic. It doesn't feel like wood whatsoever. The other problem is that the parts of the desk where my computer chair hit it, my arms have rubbed off the finish, or where the desk just got a little damage, is kinda unrepairable. Yes, you can lightly sand the area and then apply more polyurethane over top, but getting the sheen to be even and the exact same color is really hard and honestly, probably not worth the work at all. That's why most people refer to polyurethane as a finish that needs to be completely removed before you try to refinish a project. Penetrating oil finishes, on the other hand, soak into the wood and harden. No matter what all of the YouTube videos tell you, these oils do not create a more durable surface that is better than polyurethane or any other film finish. What they do offer is a finish that's super easy to apply, and arguably more important, a finish that is easy to reapply and repair. You can simply spot sand a damaged area of the project and apply more oil on top. It's easy. There is no perfect finish. Every finish out there has its pros and its cons, and it's important to know what you are getting yourself into with whatever product you pick. With all of these woodworking myths, it is important to arm yourself with the truth, and your projects will turn out better and you will have way more fun creating them. Let me know what myths you want me to bust next, and I'll see you on the next one.